Welcome to the deep dive. It's funny. Usually when we talk about courage, our brains immediately jump to the cinematic stuff,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. The massive explosive moments.
Yeah, exactly. Like running into a burning building or leaping into battle or, I don't know, taking down a bank robber. We have this really deep-seated expectation that bravery has to be loud.
Right. It has to be public.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost always has to involve some kind of intense physical danger.
Yeah, it's like we're looking for the superhero
We
landing.
really are. I mean, we've been conditioned since childhood through movies and stories to think of courage strictly as this extraordinary response to a life or death crisis.
Right.
So if there isn't a cape or a medal involved,
Mm.
we just don't recognize it as bravery at all.
But then, you step back and look at what it actually takes to just navigate a random Tuesday as a human being. And suddenly that superhero cape feels completely irrelevant to your actual life.
Yeah.
So today we are going on a mission to explore the everyday anatomy of courage for you. And we're looking at a really fascinating stack of sources today.
Yeah, this is a great one.
It's an actual raw transcript from a youth mentoring session. This is part of a 16-week program, and the room is this incredible, volatile mix of kids. You've got eager future leaders sitting right next to reluctant teens who, honestly, are just there to avoid a harsher punishment.
Right. They were mandated to be there.
Exactly. And we're looking at that session transcript right alongside their actual course workbook, which is titled Lesson 10, Courage. And our mission today is to show you that courage isn't some superpower reserved for the chosen few.
No, it's not.
It's a muscle, and it's one we use for incredibly relatable, microscopic daily choices.
It is a profoundly revealing set of documents, really.
Yeah.
Because to understand how to actually build that courage muscle, we first have to completely tear down our preconceived notions of what bravery actually looks like in the real world.
Right, we have to strip away the cinematic expectations.
Exactly. And the workbook they use starts that teardown process with a deceptively simple concept. It says courage is a choice.
A choice.
Yeah, which means it's not a personality trait you are simply born with. It's an active, daily decision.
That distinction is so crucial. The materials highlight a really brilliant quote from the leadership expert John C. Maxwell. He says, "Courage is moving forward in spite of fear."
In spite of fear. Notice he doesn't say it's the absence of fear.
Right.
It's the movement forward anyway. And the curriculum pairs that with a thought from Maya Angelou, which I love. She noted that courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without it, you cannot practice any other virtue consistently.
Man, that Angelou quote really forces you to stop and think because, you can be kind or honest or generous when your environment is safe, right? When everyone is smiling at you.
Oh, sure. It's easy then.
But the second your honesty costs you a promotion or your kindness costs you your social standing, you need courage to maintain those virtues. Virtues are only really tested under pressure.
That's spot on. And the workbook gets extremely granular about what this pressure actually looks like day to day. It lists out these everyday requirements for courage.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Things like seeking the truth, even when you know the answer might be painful. Or changing, even when it is so much easier to just remain comfortable in a bad situation.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And expressing your convictions when others actively challenge you. Or, learning and growing, even when it puts your weaknesses on full display for everybody to see.
Wow. Yeah, those aren't burning buildings at all.
No, they're not. These are social and internal friction points. They are the quiet, invisible moments where we either step up or we shrink back.
And one that really stood out in the session transcript was the requirement of taking the high road even when others treat you badly.
Oh, that sparked quite a conversation in the room.
It really did. The mentor running the session asks the youth which of the requirements on the list is the hardest, and a whole wave of kids immediately point to taking the high road.
Right.
And one of the youth in the room perfectly articulates why. He says it's incredibly hard because taking the high road can make you look foolish. It can make it look like you are weak or, being taken advantage of in front of your peers.
And what's playing out in that room is a literal masterclass in social dynamics. Because for a teenager, social currency is everything.
It's survival.
It is their survival mechanism. So deciding not to retaliate, deciding to just walk away when someone is disrespecting you, that requires a massive amount of internal fortitude because it's perceived in the hallway as a profound loss of status.
Right, you're willingly taking a hit to your reputation.
Exactly. But then another mentor in the room chimes in with a story that proves courage doesn't even have to involve conflict with another person. She admits to the kids that when she was in school, she had intense, paralyzing daily anxiety just over having to change clothes for physical education class.
Oh, man. She said she would start sweating bullets the entire period before PE, just dreading it.
Yeah,
And just the sheer physiological toll of that chronic anxiety is exhausting.
it is. And she points out to the room that just pushing through that dread day after day and doing the thing anyway, that is the exact same mechanism as courage. It's taking action when your body is screaming at you to hide.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second.
Hmm?
Because think about how that flips our cultural framing. We treat courage like it's a massive, spectacular fireworks display. We wait for the 4th of July to use it.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. But based on this lesson, courage is actually more like a tiny 1-pound hand weight. We're waiting for the burning building, but we're ignoring the real daily practice of courage. So I have to ask, does our societal focus on big bravery actually set us up to fail at small bravery?
Unquestionably. I mean, if you think courage is only for heroes, you completely let yourself off the hook for the daily heavy lifting.
Wow, yeah.
You don't practice with the 1-pound weights. So when you actually need the strength to, say, set a boundary with a toxic family member or speak up in a tense corporate meeting, the muscle has completely atrophied.
It's just not there when you need it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if courage is a muscle, as the workbook suggests, then fear is simply the resistance. It's the weight we are pushing against to build the muscle.
Right.
And to train effectively, we need to understand the mechanics of that resistance, because not all fears are created equal.
And you really see that in the transcript. The fears these kids shared in the room were so intensely raw.
They really opened up.
They did. When asked what they were afraid of, they didn't hold back at all. They listed abandonment. They listed death. One student talked about the very real anxiety of their parents freaking out over small things.
Which is such a common, very real stressor for kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then one youth shared something that honestly gave me chills. They said their biggest fear was getting lost in the sauce.
Getting lost in the sauce. That phrase is so incredibly evocative.
Isn't it? It perfectly captures this profound existential dread, just floating through life without purpose, just existing, being a background character in your own life and letting the world happen to you instead of making choices.
Yeah.
I think a lot of adults listening to this right now can relate to that fear of getting lost in the sauce of a corporate job or a stagnant routine.
Oh, without a doubt. And what this session does brilliantly is take all these raw, chaotic emotions and categorize them. The mentors introduce a really critical distinction between good fears and bad fears.
Okay, break that down first.
So, good fears are biological imperatives. They protect you from guaranteed harm. The classic example the workbook uses is touching a hot stove. There's no ambiguity there. If you touch it, you will get burned.
So the fear is highly functional.
Exactly. And there's an incredible story from one of the mentors, a guy named Bob, in the transcript.
Oh, Bob's story is wild.
Yeah, he shares that when he was 9 years old, he was out on a tube in the water, and some older kids pushed him off. He couldn't swim, so he sank like a stone.
Terrifying.
He vividly remembers taking a deep breath of water and thinking he was entirely gone. He ended up getting rescued, throwing up on the beach, the whole 9 yards, and he developed a very healthy, intense, good fear of drowning.
But the amazing part is the mechanism of how he used it, right? That good fear drove him to become a lifeguard. He understood the real physical danger, and instead of avoiding the water forever, he mastered the environment.
Yes, that is a good fear, serving its exact evolutionary purpose. It kept him alive, and then it motivated preparation.
Right.
But then the lesson pivots to bad fears. And bad fears, in this specific framework, are the fictional outcomes we invent in our own heads about the unknown.
Fictional outcomes.
Yeah. It's the anxiety of walking to a networking event and assuming everyone is going to judge you. Or, for the youth, wanting to sit with the lonely kid at lunch, but being terrified that your own friends will mock you. It's ambiguity that our brains automatically fill with a worst-case scenario.
Okay, wait. I actually really struggle with this categorization.
Oh, how so?
Well, isn't the fear of social rejection just our brain's ancient survival mechanism trying to keep us safely inside the tribe? Like millennia ago, if you got mocked and kicked out of the tribe, you literally starved to death alone in the woods.
You're touching on the exact evolutionary biology of it, yeah. It is deeply wired into our nervous system.
Right. So if my biology is functioning exactly as it was designed to keep me from being ostracized and dying, how is that a bad fear? It feels a little dismissive to call a biological defense mechanism bad just because we made it up in our modern context.
Well, we aren't blaming the hardware here. We're recognizing that our environment has changed much faster than our hardware has.
Okay.
Anthropologists call this an evolutionary mismatch. Your amygdala, that little almond-shaped fear center deep in your brain, is reacting to the possibility of a cafeteria snub or an awkward moment in a board meeting with the exact same chemical alarm bells it uses for a saber-toothed tiger.
Ah.
So when the workbook labels it bad, it's not saying the physical feeling is invalid. It's saying the utility of the fear is obsolete.
Oh, I see. So the hardware is firing correctly, but the threat assessment software is outdated?
Precisely. A bad fear is one that paralyzes you from growth without actually saving your life.
Right.
Your brain is reacting to a social risk as if it were a physical predator.
Right. Right.
Recognizing it as a bad fear is actually a cognitive behavioral technique. It's a structured way of retraining your thought patterns to tell your amygdala, hey, thanks for the warning, we appreciate the alarm, but we aren't going to physically die if we say the wrong thing in this meeting.
Okay, understanding the evolutionary mismatch really makes the concept click for me. But I mean, since we can't just flip a biological switch and turn off a million years of evolution, how do we actually dismantle these bad fears in the moment?
Right.
When your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and your amygdala is literally screaming at you to run.
Well, the workbook offers a very mechanical three-step remedy for this, and it anchors it with a quote from Mark Twain: courage is resistance to fear. Mastery of fear, not absence of fear.
There's that theme again, not the absence.
Exactly. So step one is simply acknowledging that adversity is permanent. You have to stop waiting for the fear to go away before you act. And the mentors use a really great metaphor here. They say a plane takes off against the wind, not with it.
I love that. The resistance is actually what creates the lift. If there's no headwind, the plane doesn't fly.
Exactly. So step one is accepting the wind. Step two is what we just talked about, running the diagnostic to identify whether the fear is a good physical threat or a bad social fiction.
Okay.
And step three is reducing the unknown by actively preparing for possible outcomes. The brain hates ambiguity. If you mentally prepare for the worst-case social scenario, say someone laughing at you, the fear physically shrinks because the ambiguity is gone.
Right, you've planned for it. But the most poignant part of this discussion in the transcript comes from a mentor who shares a very heavy personal experience. And he uses it to illustrate what happens when we initially can't overcome the resistance.
Yes, that moment in the room was incredibly powerful.
It really was. The mentor was talking about his childhood, and he shared that he grew up facing physical abuse from his father. And he described to the youth what it felt like to be completely, utterly paralyzed by fear. He said he knew a beating was coming, and his body would just freeze. He couldn't fight back. He couldn't even run away like his sister did. He just stood there and took it. And it was a stark reminder that sometimes fear doesn't just make us nervous. It literally freezes our motor functions.
It's the freeze response. It's sort of the lesser talked about sibling of fight or flight. When your sympathetic nervous system decides that fighting will get you killed and running is impossible, it just cuts the power. It immobilizes you to minimize damage.
Wow.
And he shares this traumatic reality, not to be a victim, but to draw a massive, empowering distinction for the youth.
Yeah.
He tells them that the only difference between someone who's a coward and someone who is courageous is that the courageous person just hangs in there a few more seconds.
Hangs in there a few more seconds.
Yes, they still feel the absolute terror. They still experience the biological paralysis, but they force a circuit breaker in their brain to take an action anyway.
So what does this all mean? If I'm stuck in that biological freeze response, I clearly can't just fake being brave. My brain has to actively reroute my attention. The mentor says later in the session that your perception drives your capability.
Right.
How do you force your brain to focus on optimism when your body is entirely locked up? Is it just a matter of faking it until you make it?
Not at all. It's done by understanding how fear calculates value. Fear is intrinsically loss-averse.
Okay.
When you stand at the edge of a scary decision, your brain runs a rapid-fire inventory of everything you stand to lose. I will lose my reputation. I will lose my comfort. I will be embarrassed.
It's a mental ledger.
Exactly. And to break the freeze, you have to force a cognitive override. The lesson teaches that you must aggressively shift your focus away from what you stand to lose and deeply concentrate on what you stand to gain.
So optimism in this context isn't about wearing rose-colored glasses or, toxic positivity. It's a functional tool.
It is the mechanical foundation of courage.
Yeah.
You have to populate the other side of the mental ledger. You tell your brain, if I do this, I will gain self-respect. I will gain a new skill. I will gain the truth.
Wow.
And when the perceived gain finally outweighs the perceived loss, the paralysis breaks.
That shift from loss to gain really is the key to unlocking the whole thing. So when someone does manage to break that freeze response, when they reframe the math in their head and actually take action, what happens biologically and psychologically? What is the actual payoff?
Well, the material outlines 4 distinct mechanisms of payoff. The first is that acting with courage gives you physical energy.
Physical energy.
Yeah. When you finally push past the paralysis and do the thing you were terrified of,
Hmm.
your body processes that survival as a massive victory. It creates a massive adrenaline and dopamine spike.
Oh, it's that urge to just scream out loud in joy or pump your fist because you survived the threat your brain invented.
Precisely. You flush the stress cortisol out of your system and replace it with positive acceleration.
That makes total sense.
The second benefit is that it literally rewires your brain to give you confidence for the next time. You've created a new neural pathway proving you didn't die.
Right.
The third is that it always gives you a win because the metric for success changes, even if you fail at the actual task. Acting in spite of the fear guarantees a psychological victory because you generate self-respect.
Because you tried.
Exactly. But the fourth benefit is perhaps the most profound of all. Courage gives others courage. It is highly contagious.
And a host of this session gives the perfect tangible example of this contagion. He tells a story about standing on a bridge when he was younger, looking down at a 20-foot drop into the water.
Oh, yeah.
And he fully admits to the room of youth. If he had been standing on that bridge alone, he never would have jumped. Not a chance.
No way.
He only jumped because there were 4 guys, he was dead last in line, and he watched his 3 friends jump first. Seeing them survive it, seeing them take the action, gave him the psychological juice he needed to step off the ledge. It's a perfect illustration of the contagion effect. And the workbook connects this deeply to our social environments, whether that's a high school cafeteria or a corporate boardroom. It features a quote from Malala Yousafzai. She said, "There's a moment when you have to choose whether to be silent or stand up."
Such a powerful quote.
It is, and the curriculum then asks the youth to evaluate themselves with a critical question. It asks, are you a push-down person or a pull-up person?
And they tie this directly to the concept of bullying, which obviously resonates deeply in a room full of teenagers, but honestly, it applies just as much to office politics for adults.
The dynamics are identical. The mentor explains that bullies don't just pick targets at random. They target those who devalue themselves. They look for the person who doesn't project confidence, the person whose posture says they are already defeated.
Right.
So when you act with courage, when you stand up for yourself or assert a boundary, you are doing 2 things simultaneously. First, you are pulling yourself up, which practically removes the target from your back because you are no longer an easy victim. But secondly, and more importantly for the ecosystem, you pull up everyone who is watching you.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about how powerful that is. It's almost like courage acts as a form of social immunity.
Oh, I like that. Social immunity.
Right. Picture a tense corporate meeting where a boss is totally out of line and everyone is staring at their shoes, terrified to speak up. When one person finally takes the social risk and says, "Actually, I disagree," they lower the psychological barrier for the entire room.
They absolutely do.
They absorb that initial spike of risk so others don't have to. The second person to speak up doesn't need nearly as much courage as the first, because the first person proved it wasn't fatal.
Absorbing the initial risk. That is a brilliant way to frame it. Because humans are fundamentally social mimics. We have mirror neurons in our brains that simulate the actions of others.
Right, the monkey see, monkey do effect.
Exactly. When we see someone succumb to a bad fear, like the fear of social rejection, and they shrink back, our mirror neurons fire, and we all shrink back. The room gets smaller. But when we see someone take the hit, or better yet, take the action and succeed, our brains simulate that victory. We think, well, if they can survive that, maybe I can too. You aren't just saving yourself, you are changing the entire ecosystem of the room. You create a 1% shift in the reality of everyone watching.
It completely flips the script on how we view bravery. We started this deep dive talking about fireworks and cinematic heroes and, waiting for the moment to run into a burning building.
Yeah.
But looking at these sources, from the raw struggles of the youth in a mentoring session to the hard truths in a leadership workbook, We see something much more grounded and much more demanding.
Much more demanding.
Courage isn't a cape you wear. It's a daily choice to evaluate the tiny 1-pound fears that pop up. It's the conscious decision to identify if a fear is actually a biological imperative protecting you or just an outdated software glitch holding you back. It's the active mechanical shift in your brain to focus on the self-respect you'll gain instead of the comfort you'll lose. And sometimes it's just the gritty willingness to hang in there a few seconds longer than your anxiety wants you to.
And if we look at the ultimate mechanism behind all of this, it leaves us with a really powerful, lingering thought to walk away with.
What's that?
Well, we almost universally think of courage as a self-improvement tool. We think of it as something we need strictly for our own personal growth, our own career advancement, or our own survival.
Sure.
But if courage truly is biologically and socially contagious, as this lesson proves, what if the most courageous thing you do this week isn't for you at all?
Oh, wow.
What if your act of bravery, your willingness to look foolish or take the high road, is simply about giving someone else in the room the silent permission they need to finally take their own leap?
You pick up the 1-pound hand weight just so someone watching knows it can be lifted. Let that sink in the next time you feel the resistance. Thanks for diving deep with us.